Hello, we are Team 5 from the Introduction to Quantitative Risk Management course, and today we'll be presenting the results of our research project on ESG practice and corporate financial performance in Korea. This is our table of contents. First, introduction. Second, research design. Third, data and methodology. And empirical analysis and conclusion. In recent years, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, has become a key framework for evaluating corporate sustainability. It is no longer just about making a profit. Companies are now expected to operate ethically, transparently, and responsibly. Among the three ESG pillars, governance plays a particularly important role. It promotes accountability, ethical leadership, and transparency, all of which are essential for building trust with stakeholders and investors. Our research specifically investigates how ESG scores and tribal affiliation influence corporate financial performance. We used four major indicators: ROE, ROA, Tobin skew, and market value to measure performance. To make our analysis more accurate, we also include firm size as a moderating variable. Larger firms might experience ESG differently compared to smaller ones. So we wanted to test whether size matters when it comes to ESG effectiveness. The dataset covers firms lists on KOSPI and KOSDAQ between 2012 and 2023, and we focused on the ICT industry, which is rapidly growing and highly influential in the Korean economy. Through this research, our goal is to explore whether pursuing ESG strategies actually leads to better financial outcomes, and ultimately whether sustainability and profitability can go hand in hand in today's Korean corporate landscape.
Now let's walk through our research framework, which forms the foundation of our study. At the core of our research, we ask a key question: do companies with stronger governance practices and/or those affiliated with tribal groups tend to perform better financially? We approach this question by designing a conceptual model that incorporates three main elements, which are ESG score, tribal affiliation, and corporate financial performance, with firm size acting as a moderating variable. Let me explain how these variables fit together. At the center of our model is the dependent variable, corporate financial performance or CFP. This represents the overall financial success of a firm, and we measured it using several indicators, which are return on assets or ROA, return on equity or ROE, Tobin-Skew, and market capitalization. These measures reflect both internal profitability and external market valuation, which together provide a well-rounded view of financial performance. Now, on the left side of the model, we have our first independent variable, the ESG score. This score captures how well a firm is managing its internal governance structure, such as board oversight, shareholder rights, executive accountability, and overall transparency. The basic idea here is that better governance reduces the likelihood of risky decisions, improves stakeholder trust, and enhances long-term strategic alignment. So, naturally, we hypothesize that higher governance scores will lead to stronger financial performance. On the right side of the model, we introduce Jebel affiliation as another independent variable. In the South Korea context, Jebel groups refer to large family-owned business conglomerates, names like Samsung, LG, SK, Hyundai, and so on. These firms tend to have greater access to capital, more established reputations, and significant market power, which can translate into stronger financial results. However, Jebel affiliation can also introduce complex ownership structures or bureaucratic inefficiencies, so the effect isn't always straightforward. That's why we included it in our model to see how it truly interacts with financial outcomes. And finally, to add more depth to our analysis, we included firm size as a moderating variable. Firm size was based on official classifications from Korea's Fair Trade Commission, distinguishing large business groups from smaller or mid-sized companies. By including firm size, we can examine whether the impact of governance or Jebel affiliation varies depending on how big the company is. For example, does good governance matter more for smaller firms, or does Jebel affiliation boost performance more for larger ones? In sum, our conceptual model examines the influence of ESG score and Jebel affiliation on corporate performance while also asking how firm size might strengthen or weaken these effects. This framework guided both our data selection and our regression analysis, which we'll explain next.
In this study, we adopted regression analysis as our main method to examine the impact of ESG score on corporate financial performance. But rather than stopping at a simple correlation, we aim to understand how this relationship might change depending on firm characteristics, especially firm size. To test this, we included interaction terms in our model to explore the moderating effect of firm size. The logic here is that the same ESG score may not lead to the same financial outcome across all companies. For example, larger firms may have more capital and infrastructure to implement ESG strategies, but they may also experience more inefficiencies or slower internal decision-making processes. On the other hand, smaller firms might face resource constraints but could implement ESG more flexibly and quickly. So by incorporating this moderating variable, our goal was was to go beyond the basic question of does ESG lead to better performance and instead ask when and for whom does ESG matter most. We believe this adds an important dimension to ESG research that is often overlooked. Our data spans from 2012 to 2023, covering more than a decade of firm activity in Korea. All relevant data, including ESG score, financial outcomes, firm size, and trouble affiliation, were collected from Data Guide and DART, which are two of the most reliable databases for Korean firms. Now, let me explain how we built our dataset. We focused specifically on companies in the information and communication technology or ICT sector. This industry was selected because it is highly dynamic, innovation-driven, and increasingly influenced by sustainability standards. ICT firms often face pressure to respond quickly to both market and regulatory changes, which makes them ideal for analyzing ESG impact. Our target firms were selected from the Kospi and Kosdaq markets, and we only included companies with complete data for the entire period from 2012 to 2023. This helped ensure consistency across variables and reduce the risk of bias from missing data. For industry classification, we used KIC and KSIC codes through Data Guide and DART. Firm size were calculated using the logarithm of total assets, which is a common approach in financial research. Trouble affiliation was identified through public disclosure and classified as a binary variable. 1 for affiliated firm, 0 for non-affiliated ones. Our key variable included ROA, ROE, Tobin skew, market capitalization, ESG governance score, firm size, and travel status. With this carefully constructed data set, we were able to run robust panel regressions and test our hypothesis with greater reliability.
This study employed multiple regression analysis to examine the relationships among variables. ESG scores and Chebol affiliation were treated as independent variables, while firm size was included as a moderating variable. The dependent variables were ROA, ROE, Tobin skew, and market volume. We also included interaction terms to test for moderation effects. The statistical analysis was conducted using Stata program. And in processing our data, we used the panel data structure, identifying each firm with a unique firm ID and organizing the data by year from 2012 to 2023. We applied the fixed effects model, FE, using the XTREG comment in Stata, which controls for time-invariant firm-level characteristics. This approach allowed us to isolate the within-firm variation and examine the effects of ESG scores and Chebol affiliation on financial performance more accurately. We investigated the impact of ESG scores on corporate financial performance using panel data from ICT firms listed on the Kospi and Kosdaq from 2012 to 2023. Although we initially considered ROA, ROE, and Tobin skew as dependent variables, only ROA showed a statistically significant relationship with ESG scores in our preliminary analysis. As a result, we conducted all subsequent regression models, especially those with moderating variables, using ROA only.
In our first model, the ESG score had a significant negative effect on ROA, coefficient equals to negative 0.5116, P equals 0.040. This suggests that higher ESG scores may be associated with lower short-term profitability. However, the explanatory power of the models was limited. R squared equals 0.0168, indicating the need to consider additional variables. In the second model, we included an interaction term between ESG and firm size. The main effect of ESG was actually positive, beta equals 3.2990, but the interaction coefficient was negative, which is negative 0.2260, suggesting that the positive impact of ESG diminishes or reverses as a firm size increases. In the third model, which includes both travel affiliation and firm size, we found ESG score was not statistically significant, P equals 0.827, travel affiliation had a positive but insignificant effect, coefficient equals 4.4470, P equals 0.244, and firm size showed a significant negative effect on ROA, coefficient equals negative 2.777, P is less than 0.01.
This result highlights the importance of considering firm-level characteristics when evaluating the financial outcomes of ESG strategies. Specifically, variables such as firm size and civil affiliation play a crucial role in determining how ESG governance practices translate into financial performance. The presence or absence of these firm characteristics appears to influence the extent to which ESG efforts impact profitability. Furthermore, these findings suggest that the effectiveness of ESG governance is not uniform across all firms. Instead, the results demonstrate that ESG outcomes vary depending on the specific context of each company. In this regard, incorporating moderating variable into the analysis, such as firm size, is essential. By doing so, we can better capture the complexities and nuances that exist in the relationship between ESG strategies and financial performance. Without accounting for these moderating effects, we risk overlooking key dynamics that shape how ESG governance operates within different organizational contexts. In conclusion, this study provides evidence that ESG governance may negatively impact short-term profitability, particularly as measured by ROA. Our regression results indicate that the firms with higher ESG scores tended to exhibit lower returns on assets. In addition, the interaction between ESG governance and firm size confirms that firm-specific contexts do indeed matter. The data show that as firm size increases, the potential positive effects of ESG governance on financial performance diminish or may even reverse. Firm size consistently demonstrated a negative effect on ROA across the models tested, underscoring its significance as a factor in understanding corporate financial outcomes. Civil affiliation, on the other hand, did not show any statistically significant influence on ROA in our analysis. Despite the assumption that civil firms might benefit from their scale, resource availability, or market dominance, our findings indicate that civil status alone does not guarantee any measurable advantage when it comes to the finance results associated with ESG governance practices. Overall, these findings imply that ESG governance does not necessarily lead to improved financial performance across all firms or financial indicators. This suggests that both firms and policymakers should adopt a nuanced approach when designing or evaluating ESG-related strategies and initiatives. It is crucial to take into account contextual factors such as firm size, ownership structure, and potentially other organizational attributes in order to develop ESG practices that are both effective and aligned with corporate goals. Future research could build on these results by investigating industry-specific dynamics or the long-term financial effects of ESG governance. For example, while this study focused on short-term profitability as captured by ROA, future studies might explore whether ESG governance contributes to sustained value creation or resilience over longer time horizons. In addition, sector-specific analysis could provide deeper insights into how ESG governance interacts with the unique conditions and stakeholders' expectations present in different industries. Such research would help to further clarify the conditions under which ESG governance delivers both sustainability and financial benefits. Thank you for listening.